We've really been fortunate this summer throughout most of Oklahoma to have enjoyed rains and relatively mild, in fact, sometimes even cool weather. And as a result, it's really put our soil in good condition for some fall planting. We should be really right in the middle of planting for the fall garden now. And today we're going to be planting beans, bush beans, and also beets, and giving you a few tips on how to ensure yourself a good stand, particularly of the beets and some of the other cool season crops later on. And then we'll also be giving you some ideas for some future fall planting. But one of the important things in planting in the fall garden is to be sure that the soil is worked well, that you have a good seed bed prepared, that you've worked out all the weeds and the grass that may have come up in between your plantings in your summer garden, and also that the soil is well supplied with moisture. Well, we've had a good rain here just in the last 2 or 3 days, and so we don't have to worry about supplying the soil with moisture now, but if it's dry in your area, you'll probably want to irrigate real well the night before you plant or maybe a day before you plant, and then work your soil well. Another tip on planting in the fall garden in order to ensure a good stand is to be sure that your seed are fresh, or at least that they're of good viable seed. If you have seed left over from the spring, they're probably okay. If not, you may want to go ahead and buy some more. And some seeds perform better if they're pre-soaked the night before you plant, and that's the case with beans. I'm planting a variety of bean today called Provider. Provider is a good fall bean because it comes off in about 52 days, and it also is a bean that provides a good fresh bean, but also one that would be good for freezing or canning. I soak the seeds in a container of water overnight, and they've begun to swell, and the germination procedure probably has even started. And I'm planting them not much different than I would in the spring garden, a little bit deeper. I'm planting these about 1.5 inches deep and spacing them about 1.5 inches to 2 inches apart. I'm not too worried about getting them too thick because I can always come in and thin some of them out if I get them too thick, but I think the important thing is to be sure that you put enough seed in there to assure yourself of a good stand. Now, with these bean seed and also another variety of bean seed that you may want to plant in the fall garden, again, it's important to, as quickly as you've got the beans planted, then cover them over with the soil. This keeps the sun from beating down on the bean seed and beginning to dry them out. And the important thing is that once the germination procedure has started on all of our seeds, we want to continue to allow it to proceed. And one way to do that is to cover them over with soil, and then you may want to water very quickly after you've planted, particularly again if your soil is not well supplied with moisture. I'm mounding the soil just a little bit over these beans because that will give them some insulation from the heat and also help keep the moisture more uniform around the seed itself. So beans in the garden are a good fall crop. I think you'd want to be sure that you get your beans out very quickly now, depending on the length of the time it takes to mature, but a 45 to 52 day bean is a very good variety to plant in the garden. Another crop that we can be planting right now are beets. We usually don't think about beets as a fall crop, but actually they do quite well in Oklahoma. And again, soil preparation is very important in planting beets. In this instance, I've made a little bit of a bedded area here. This bed is about 10 inches wide, and I've raised the bed about 3 to 4 inches. This will allow me to really only have to maintain just this bed area as far as my plants are concerned. Because it's elevated a little bit, I'll get a little bit more air movement over it and will hence keep the soil a little bit cooler. Again, it's important this soil be well supplied with moisture, just like my bean seed soil was. With beets, we have to plant those rather shallow, but yet also we need to have enough soil around the seed so that there's intimate contact between the seed and the soil itself. So on my beet seed, I'm making a very shallow row of about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch deep, and I will sow the seed in there and then very lightly cover the seed over with soil. Again, I have soaked my seed overnight. It's really important with beet seed that you soak them overnight because they have a real hard outer coating, and not only does it help the seed begin this germination process, but it softens that seed coat so that they will germinate much more readily. Now, when you do this, it's going to make the seed a little bit difficult to handle because they will tend to stick to your hand. But because they do have the seed coating, they're not started germinating yet, you can really just rub them off of your hand, and you don't have to worry too much about treating them very tenderly because they're a pretty hardy seed themselves with that tough seed coat. I'm going to go ahead on down and plant just a few more of these, but I don't want to plant all of my beet seed in this area because this is also the same type of area that I can use later on for planting lettuce, radishes, mustard and turnip greens, and the other types of crops that enjoy the same type of conditions that these crops do. Now keep in mind that these are really cool season crops. They prefer cool temperatures and cool soil, and as they begin to mature, of course, the conditions will become considerably cooler and more mild. But right now, we run the risk still of having some very warm days here in late August and early September. And so after I gently cover these seed and get the soil just barely in contact with the seed itself, I want to do some other things that will ensure me a chance of hastening the germination and the subsequent emergence of these beet seeds and the others. One of the things that I'm going to do is be sure that I have enough moisture there. And I only want to keep the bed and, in fact, just the seed row moist. And so I have a soaker hose here that I will put on it. I'm going to ask Sue if she'll turn the water on for me here, because this will immediately begin to soak this area down, and I will keep a close eye on it and be sure that we keep the soil moist, but that we also allow enough time in here for it to dry out in between soaking so that it doesn't really get too puddled. Then if Sue, if you're going to come down and help me put the row cover on, we're putting a row cover over this. This is a floating row cover that will really just kind of keep the area shaded a little bit. If you don't have a row cover such as this, you could just use cheesecloth, a couple layers of cheesecloth. But I have it wrapped around a small piece of landscape timber at the end down there to hold it and hold it up above the row a little bit. I'm going to do the same way down here. Just kind of wrap it around this. This will not only keep it from flapping in the wind, but will also hold it over the row just a little bit, just so that it doesn't lay real close to that. So I think some tips and follow up here on planting in the fall garden is important to remember. Be sure the soil is well prepared. Be sure it's moistened. Soak your seeds overnight before you plant, and then try to shade or somehow reduce the intense light or the high temperatures from late August and from early September. In a few minutes on Oklahoma Gardening, we'll show you how to prime some lettuce seed to get those ready to plant in the fall garden, because they're another crop that we'll want to plant within the next few days or week or so in the garden. But if you're interested in planting in the fall garden, then check with your local county extension office and request our fall gardening fact sheet 6009, or write us at Oklahoma Gardening. We'll be glad to mail you one. The fall gardening fact sheet has tips on how to prepare the soil, how to take care of young plants as they emerge in the fall garden, and also planting dates and planting and varieties to plant in the fall garden. So I think that if you've not tried a fall garden, you'd enjoy trying one. If you've tried one in the past, try some different techniques this year and maybe you'll be more successful.